All right, everyone, welcome, 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 welcome. So good to see everyone here. I hope you've had a wonderful Public Space Summit 2021. It's really heartwarming to see everyone come together virtually, and we're looking forward to seeing some of y'all tomorrow out in the wild. We want to get this last session started. It's Friday afternoon. It's a beautiful San Francisco day. So first, I want to introduce to you one of my lovely colleagues here at the San Francisco Parks Alliance, Sonia Gonzalez Banks. She is our Director of Marketing, External Affairs, and Development. Sonia, would love for you to come online and talk to the people.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome everyone to the final session of day one of the Public Space Summit. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our parks and what I've learned over the last year. When we began sheltering in place in March, few of us imagined the impact COVID would have on every aspect of our lives. We were confined by the city to isolate in our homes. We logged too many hours in front of screens, and our circle and friends and family dwindled to a trusted few. If you were like me, anxiety kept you from enjoying everyday tasks, grocery shopping, dining out, going to the gym. Celebrations, vacations, and dinner parties were placed on hold. And yet, through all the challenges and changes, we learned one thing undeniably. Our parks are essential. They were the one place we could go to recapture a sense of normalcy. Thank goodness for our parks. My name is Sonia Gonzalez Banks. I'm a Bayview resident, a mother to 3 young children, and the Director of External Affairs at SF Parks Alliance. One of the best parts of my job is thanking the people who support our parks. Every time I get to thank a partner or a donor, I feel that gratitude deeply, sincerely, professionally, but also personally. Sometimes getting things done in San Francisco can be an uphill battle. But it's people like you that truly make San Francisco a better place to live. Tickets for this event should have cost over $100 each, but it is because of the generosity of our donors and sponsors that we are able to subsidize this event. To that end, if you felt moved, rejuvenated, or inspired, you felt connected to a bigger community by anything you experienced today, learned today, I hope you will consider becoming a member of San Francisco Parks Alliance. The link to learn more about membership can be found in the chat. We need more individuals like you supporting our parks and public spaces and becoming Parks Alliance members. 2 last things I want to share. This year, Parks Alliance celebrates 50 years of better public spaces. Why do I share this? Why does it matter? Who really cares? Well, I thought about this. And I think it feels good to know that for the last 50 years, neighbors just like you have been coming together to imagine, to plan, build great spaces across San Francisco. Our city is full of people that care deeply about its future and are willing to, quite literally, put their hands in the dirt to make these things happen. San Francisco is one of the highest rated park systems in the world, and it is because of people like you who have chosen to prioritize and invest in our public spaces. And finally, I want to share with you that tomorrow, some of the Parks Alliance staff, including me, will be out filming during the exploration day. Please do say hi if you see us. We'd love to hear more about what inspires you to help make the city a better place. I'm going to end this greeting with a sneak peek of the video we are filming. The goal of this piece is to celebrate you, city's change makers, to make people feel proud of their parks, and to be inspired to join our collective work. Thank you again for being a part of this conference and for stepping up and investing in the city when it needs you the most. Here's the video.
Hi everyone. What a cool video. Sonia, thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm so excited to see the completed version of it when it's done. But really glad that we were able to share a sneak peek with everyone here today. Again, I'm Phillip Nguyen, the Director of Parks and Place here at the San Francisco Parks Alliance. And I just want to thank everyone that's here for spending their Friday afternoon with us. I hope many of you can come back for our in-person events tomorrow and be able to see one another in person safely, be able to visit some of the incredible projects that have been highlighted during the day's events today. I hope some of you are able to attend the Wheel of Partners and get a really fun glimpse at the incredible diversity of work that's happening across our community partner network. We've heard so many inspiring stories today about places like Tunnel Top Park, the Great Highway, Skaten Place, Lafayette Park, Adam Rogers Park, the Dolores Pollinator Boulevard, Garden for the Environment, the Detroit Steps, the 22nd Street Jungle Steps, Bernal Heights Outdoor Cinema, Sutro Stewards. The list goes on and on. And I think the thread that ties all of this work together is this idea of community-based stewardship. Here at the San Francisco Parks Alliance, we have the honor of being able to provide fiscal sponsorship to 86 groups currently this year, and to partner with hundreds more in all the different ways that we work across the city. And you may have heard or seen in the materials for today's events and tomorrow's events this term community partner network. Over the years, our work with partners at the San Francisco Parks Alliance has had a variety of different names. And this new name that we're taking on really speaks to an aspect of our work that we really want to emphasize in the coming years. And that I think the events of today and tomorrow speaks to directly, which is about strengthening connections between peers. Every one of our partners, whether they're somebody we support through fiscal sponsorship or work with through another mode, has truly valuable knowledge to share, and they all have things to learn as well. And we see ourselves here at the San Francisco Parks Alliance as a backbone organization that can help the spirit of community-led stewardship continue to flourish in San Francisco. And with that in mind, I'm so excited to welcome Jason Roberts, the founder of Better Block, whose incredible work has been focused on working with communities to find ways that they can explore the dreams and visions that they have for their neighborhoods and cities in real time and space, through rapidly deploying improvements and programming as a way to build a plan, to strengthen community, and to take action. And I've had the great benefit and joy of being able to do some direct collaborative work with Jason in the past, and I feel like Jason's work is really about unlocking the agency that we should all feel about the public realm. Our streets and sidewalks, parks and plazas are the one thing in our society that we all share undeniably. And to that end, they're the best place for us to understand each other better, to bridge divides, to figure out what we want the future to look like, and to honor the past. I'll be back at the end of Jason's talk to answer questions from the Q&A. Please don't be shy. It's at the bottom of your Zoom box to use the Q&A function to drop in some questions for Jason about his presentation and about his work. And I'll hand it over to Jason Roberts to give us a glimpse at how he and Better Block look at the world and the public realm and some of the really incredible things they've been able to achieve. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be asked to take part in this conference. And Philip and I have been longtime friends and have had a chance to collaborate in a few efforts. So it's nice to kind of come back full circle on that. I'm in Dallas, Texas, so it's a little later in the day over here for me, but I'm going to pull up my presentation here. Let me see. Okay. So I am the founding director of the Better Block Foundation. We can based in Dallas, Texas. We do work all over. And I will tell kind of a story about our work and the history where it started and how I became involved with these ideas on the public realm and how to, be more engaged in these spaces to help them become more activated. But then also kind of tell you about the work we're doing now and how that's and what's been happening since that time and the lessons we've learned. But I'll start with an image I start often with when I'm giving a presentation. And this was kind of an early image I saw. This is in Paris. It's in the Montmartre region. I remember when I first saw this image, I thought, man, where is this? And why isn't this in my neighborhood? And if it was there, I'd want to go there every single day. I want to retire here or put this on a postcard. And I asked, friends about this, like, what do you think about places that like this? And they're like, yeah, we wish we had this in our neighborhood too. We'd go there every day. We'd have our kids work at these spaces and, these places we would celebrate. And I said, well, if we all collectively wish we had more places that looked like this, then why do we keep building places that look like this? And that was kind of the initial idea behind the work, was thinking we build things all the time in our cities. And we can either build them in a way where we want to celebrate the spaces we're in and they reaffirm life, or these other spaces that we build now just feel transactional and they feel kind of like, I'm supposed to come in, come out. We wouldn't care if it was here today and it left tomorrow. So that kind of began my journey of like realizing we build places all the time. Why do we build them the way we do? And then what are inspirations that we can take from other areas that we can start applying to our own communities? And so that made me do deeper dives into like traveling and seeing places like in Rome that were, thousands of years old, but these public spaces that had markets and they had fountains and they had young people and old people. They're full of life. And seeing like bike infrastructure in places like Amsterdam or in Bogota, Colombia, and just looking at these and like, wow, these robust bicycle networks and people can get around in different ways and you don't have to be making car payments and things like that. And so I saw a lot of those things and I thought, well, I want to get involved. I want to see if I can take part in my own neighborhood to make transformations. The problem was I wasn't an urban planner or an architect. I was an IT guy. And thought, well, what am I going to do as an IT consultant to help like transform spaces? And so I talked to city. I went to City Hall, so I want to get involved. And they said, okay, Jason, there's lots of things you can get involved in. We've got all these plans. We have the
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We're not seeing your slides yet, although it's really great just hearing you tell the story.
Hold on.
Sarah changed your access, so.
Oh, sorry. Here we go. There we go. Present here. So I will back up real fast and show this was the initial image of the inspiration for the work, and then kind of showing the places that we do build now and wondering why we build those kind of places. So then looking again at places like in Rome, and then again in these places like that had bike infrastructure that was robust, in other places. And so, and talking about my IT consulting background and trying to figure out how am I going to get involved as an IT consultant and start transforming my own places, because I'm not considered an expert in this world. And so I went to City Hall, and City Hall said, well, Jason, you can get involved. We have all of these advisory committees. We do all this planning. We've got Forward Dallas plans. We've got Downtown Dallas 360 plans. We've got Dallas bike plans from 2011. You can pull those out. We never did anything with those. So maybe do something there. Or we have the 2035 mobility plan. And I thought, wow, Dallas will be great in 2035 if I just hope I can make it, right? So I thought, okay, this is going to take a long time to make these changes. Is there things I can just start doing in my own neighborhood to get involved? And so I started off with a project, and just to orient everyone to where I live in Dallas, I live in a neighborhood called Oak Cliff. And Oak Cliff has historically been considered the bad part of town. And part of that's because we had a few bad folks in our neighborhood. We had Bonnie and Clyde are from our neighborhood. And Lee Harvey Oswald was from our neighborhood. In fact, the first project I decided to take on was this old empty theater that had been closed for about 10 years. And there was a nonprofit group trying to raise millions of dollars to fix it up. But they couldn't get anybody interested in helping. And they said, because this was actually kind of ground zero for why we're considered the bad part of town. This is the theater where Lee Harvey Oswald was captured after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And so the only reason we had this sign was because Oliver Stone helped build the sign as a prop for the movie JFK. And so I went to this nonprofit and said, I want to get involved. And they said, it's going to take, we need millions of dollars. I said, I don't have millions of dollars. But can I somehow just take part? And I said, well, maybe we could throw an event. And so they let me use the space. I reached out to some friends, and I'm a musician, so I knew the arts world, and came back and said, why don't we, we're bringing 100 artists from the neighborhood. We'll give them all canvases and have them paint. And then when we're through, we'll kind of do just bullhorn auctions, and we'll sell off all the artwork, and we'll give it to a local charity. And so this is me and my friends inside of the theater, building these easels. And, we had bad plumbing, the electricity was bad. And minutes before we're about to open the doors, we're thinking this is going to be an abject failure. We're on the bad side of town, in a theater that's been closed for 10 years. It was the middle of winter. But when we opened the doors, we had 700 people show up. And people came out and started saying, we were waiting for someone to open this theater and let us use this. We've been seeing this for so long in our neighborhood. And I thought, well, I was waiting for someone to open it too and do something. Are we all recognizing there's this collective issues, but we just don't know where to get started? And it felt like that was kind of what was happening. So I shortly after this, I decided I wanted to keep getting involved. And I called the nonprofit group and said, look, can I help? And they said, yes, please join our board. Within 3 months, I became the president of the Texas Theater. So I tell people, be careful when you say you want to volunteer, because they will oftentimes throw the keys at you. So I continued doing work in the space, and right off the bat, we didn't have a screen. So I found a screen in someone's backyard, and we hung this up. And then we didn't have a sound system, but we started showing silent films. And we brought in a piano that we got on Craigslist for free, and neighbors would play piano to the silent films. After we exhausted the entire Charlie Chaplin collection, we had enough money to actually go in and get a sound system and start showing modern features. And now if you go back to the theater, it's become a fully operational, it's become an anchor to the neighborhood, it's back online, and obviously it's a symbol because people look at this space and say this was closed, it was, and people were disregarding our neighborhood. Now they're looking at it as a special icon. So yeah, I was working on that, decided to work on other projects, looked at bicycle infrastructure projects, and looked at like what I was seeing in Europe, and in Colombia, and it was where people were, it was more casual bicycling. It was girls in dresses and guys in suits. But then I came back to Texas and like, well, what were we doing? How are we celebrating bicycling here? And what I saw, the only thing we celebrated, the only way we knew how to really bicycle was like start wearing spandex. We started doping and going 200 miles. That was the only thing that was kind of discussed in our type of bicycling. And I thought, well, how do we get back to that other style I was seeing around the world? And so decided to come together with some friends and develop an initiative called Bike Friendly Oak Cliff. And we'll say, well, let's just see if we can get everyone to ride their old heavy Schwinn's out of the garage and take them to the post office and take them, to the grocery store, and, get our kids to start riding. And people looked at this and they said, okay, this is great, but it was hard to kind of get them together. So like, well, why don't we just throw an event? We started throwing these history tours, and I said, well, what can we celebrate in our neighborhood? And thought, well, why don't we'll follow the trail of Lee Harvey Oswald, because we had nothing else to really celebrate at the time. And so I made a call out and said, let's join us, meet us at the Grassy Knoll. It's where you're going to meet for one of these rides. And we're thinking maybe if we're lucky, 25 people will show up. But what happened was when I pulled up, there were 150 people that showed up. And what you don't see in this image is me at the front of this line looking terrified, because first of all, I didn't own a bicycle when we started Bike Friendly Oak Cliff. I just like the idea of having a bike culture. But I also thought, I am not a leader of a bicycle movement. I'm your IT guy, right? But I found out, honestly, if you're passionate about something, you have everything it takes to become a leader. People are just waiting for someone to stand up and say, hey, there's a lot of things broken here, and we've got to find a new way to make things start moving again. In short order, I started getting more involved back in my own neighborhood. I noticed in my kids' school, kids weren't even riding bicycles at all. And so I developed a program where I just gave out punch cards to the school, to all the kids at the school, and said, look, after a week, every day if you ride, we'll punch the card. And at the end of the week, if you've got 5 punches on your card, we'll all go do a big fun group ride together. And so at the end of the week, we went from 0 kids riding at the bicycles at the school, and with no bike racks or nothing, to 100 kids all riding bicycles. So we were able to show that there was this pent-up demand. People wanted to do this. And so it started slowly developing this bike culture within the community as well. Okay, so that's all led to kind of the Better Block initiative. And this was kind of this was all leading up for me looking at these spaces that weren't working anymore in my community. And so I had these empty buildings. We had these streets that in the 1960s and 70s were converted from 2-way streets to two-way streets to one-way high-speed streets, and we thinned the sidewalks. And because we changed the way the streets were formed, we didn't have parking. This used to be an old streetcar stop. And so they changed the zoning. So you couldn't have, the local pub or, bookstore anymore in the spaces. So we could only have like, accounting services or something like that that had minimal parking related to it. So, and then beyond that, we created all these laws and rules that made it either illegal or cost prohibitive to bring this place back to life. So you don't have to read all these rules, but just these were some of the rules we collected. We had the flowers on the sidewalk were going to be $1,000 in permitting. Shade awnings over every window were going to be $1,000 per window. Street cafes were going to be $1,000 times area, times market value, times what have you. And then we had rules that said it was illegal to have merchandise on the sidewalk. And then if you really want to kill your street life, we actually had rules that said it's illegal for crowds to gather on the sidewalk. So we looked at that space and we said, okay, obviously, we're not allowed to do anything to bring this back to life. So why don't we take out a block party permit? We took out the city permit called the block party permit and said, if it's a block party, we can kind of pretty much bend any rule we want, because at this point we've closed the street down and the city at this point, they're expecting all kinds of random things to happen. So we said, well, why don't we go ahead, instead of closing the street, we'll keep it open, but we'll paint bike lanes. We'll add our own cafe seating. We'll put historic lights out we got from a prop shop. We painted murals and put them painted murals on the buildings. And then we put all these businesses we wished we had in the shop. So we put bookstores and cafes and spaces for kids, and had all of our neighbors and residents that took part in this helped kind of create these little businesses. And then we printed off all these arcane laws and rules, and we put in the windows and said, all these things you see here, they're actually not allowed. We're throwing this block party permit right now, but once this is done and goes away, we can't keep this stuff. And everybody looked around and thought, well, why on earth would we not keep these things? This makes no sense. And so we were able to give people a taste of the possibilities in the spaces. And then we invited our elected officials out and all, and they were looking at this. And so they started saying, well, let's change these rules. So let's reduce these expenses, and let's change the zoning back from light industrial. Let's go back to restaurant, retail uses, and everything else that makes it more neighborhood centric. And so what we found was all those buildings that had been empty for years, within months after them changing those rules, were all leased up, all by locals within the neighborhood. So we did that first project. People said that was great, but that you did this when it was nice outside. But in Dallas, it can get really hot. In fact, 3 months out of the year, it's 100 degrees. And so we said, well, let's try this again, because people often will blame weather for why we can't have nice places. But it gets hot in New Orleans, it gets hot in Austin or Seville, Spain, but they still have this outdoor culture. So is there something we can do? And so we took another space that was gray and cold with no sidewalks on one side and broken up sidewalks on the other. There's a pole with nothing on it. We looked at the space and said, how could we cool this down, have people come into the space and enjoy being in here? And so we came out, we brought out 42 trees, brought 100 bushes to create pedestrian islands so cars would slow down and make it safer for pedestrians to cross the street. And we took old pallets from the trash behind the buildings and we put them in front of the buildings and made decks out of them. We painted our own crosswalks. We put bicycles on that pole because now we're the bike part of town. This is what we kept telling people. And then we put tables under those trees. And what happened was people came out and they would not leave. We had people come out, it was 100 degrees outside, but under a shade tree, with lemonade or iced tea, it's 85 degrees and it's comfortable. So we were able to show a new way for this place, these public spaces to come online and to be activated within our community. This is kind of an image of what that looked like, kind of all built together afterwards. In fact, I tell people, like, the time and energy it had taken consultants to come in and draw pictures, we just took that same effort and we just built it ourselves so we could actually experience it and see and test if it really worked or if it didn't work. That led to, with time, we open sourced the Better Block idea. People started contacting me and saying, hey, I want to do one of these projects in my own neighborhood. And so I created an open source guide because I was in the IT world and I'd been very tied to the open source software movement and worked with Linux, Red Hat Linux, and early forms of free software. And so I was a fan of that ethos. and how that spreads and how people learn from those ideas and make improvements based on these things. And so with time, we started getting a lot of people doing better blocks around the country than around the world. And so the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation came back to us and said, well, we have to give you a grant to help support this and grow this effort. So we developed our nonprofit. And with that, we were able to formalize some of these ideas, and we were able to start to kind of develop guidebooks and more tools so we could actually learn, not from just the projects we were doing, but from what everybody else was doing as well, and kind of develop a network, if you will, through this. And so what that meant for us was going to cities, and this is an example of a project and how we would do these projects. Like this is Akron, Ohio, and faces some issues that you see in a lot of Midwestern or Rust Belt cities where they had depopulation. There was the tire industry, which was very big. It had left. All the cars were made in Detroit, the tires were made in Akron. And so when those industries moved out of these cities, they were left with this excess infrastructure. They had empty homes, empty buildings, these lots that were between these gaps in the teeth, they call them, between the buildings. And so what we did, we'd start looking at these spaces, we'd gather all the neighbors and residents around, and we'd start just walking around and cataloging the empty buildings and say, who owns this building? Who owns this building? And then we talk to all the neighbors and say, who wants to start a business? And start making these maps to say, okay, Joe owns this building and Tina wants to start a business. Can we put them together and see if we can show an opportunity to do this, to fix these spaces and make them active now? And then we go over and we would, work with the city's official equipment, their street equipment, and we'd fill up with kids' finger paint. And then we work with just neighbor kids, and we bring white duct tape, and we'd start kind of lining the street with this white duct tape and this paint. And within a couple of hours, we could make bike lanes like we had seen in New York or in Chicago that Akron had could not believe would happen there. We take these empty buildings and we'd actually start transforming them and just taking some paint and tires and make them into with beautiful plazas and make them active again and show the possibilities for these spaces. We take the lots in between buildings and we would just take some soil and hay bales and we make plazas and activate them with small markets along the edges to see if we can spur small business alongside of those. We would take intersections and again, just take duct tape and finger paint and show how we can make the crosswalks more compelling and make them feel safer and get cars to slow down. And then we take other environments. We started getting calls for places like Duluth, Minnesota, saying it's really cold here. How do we make these places work? And so we take these spaces and we bring in fire pits and hot chocolate through food trucks and make small structures and show how we could simply and fairly quickly activate these spaces and make them more people friendly. And then after that, we had start having this is a project we did in Richardson, Texas, where businesses said, they're having us look at the street and we actually look behind the buildings. This is a drainage ditch. And we're like, why don't we activate this ditch and make it a special place? Because you have all these workers in these industrial buildings. And so we built these trails and bridges, and then we bring in trees to show how we could actually shade that as well and make that more comfortable. We worked in Toronto showing kind of make better bus infrastructure and make that feel more compelling. This is an example outside of Milwaukee, again, making these spaces more inviting for neighbors and residents, and again, slowing the traffic down as well. This was a project we did in East Palo Alto, where this was an entry point, and that was one side of the street was industrial, on the other side it was residential, and so there the talks of like, how do we make this feel that feel less industrial, more inviting, and so we built kind of better, softer gateways. And then we started getting asked to look at projects in other places that we had a project in Dallas that was had the highest major crimes in the city rate. So this would have 5 or 6 murders, like at high level crimes. And they were over policed and they had all of these other issues. And they said, and so we were asked to come out and look at it and said, is there anything we can do just to redesign the space to where it's more comfortable? And maybe it would help reduce some of the crime activities that are happening in those spaces, but make everybody else who lives here feel more welcome. Because we had, in this area, we had about 190 different languages spoken. This is largely a refugee community. And there was a school across the street, a middle school, and kids were afraid to cross the street. And so we use that as our guiding principle. How do we allow the kids to feel comfortable crossing the street and have them actually feel comfortable maybe even lingering in those spaces? And so we took that place and we brought out a shipping container. We worked with Half Price Books and we made it into like a free, imagine like a free public, a little library, but we did it like at a large level, and we built stages and swings for the kids. We put places to put kids' art in those spaces. And then at night, where people said it felt unsafe, we lit it up and better seating, and then we would program those spaces as well. This is a project we just finished this last month. This is in South Dallas, and this area is a food desert, had very minimal businesses. It had a notable amount of crime happening in the area. There was the building you see in the background actually had human trafficking issues, and so people just didn't want to come to this space here. And so we looked at that and thought, well, how do we get small business in the area? How do we address the food desert issue at this spaces? And so we went in with the community, built this alongside of a couple of churches that were just adjacent to us, filled it with, and this is a space that everyone said nobody will ever come to this space at all. And we thought nobody was going to come to this space. And what happened was we had thousands of people come every weekend. And I would say 95% of the businesses were Black-owned businesses in the area or people of color. This was a minority neighborhood, but we were able to test out food ideas that everyone in the city just presumed the community wouldn't take part in. So we had like a vegan baker, and the vegan baker sold out. And we, all of these other healthy food options. Again, everybody in the city was just making these presumptions about what could work and what couldn't work. And by putting this in the ground and testing these ideas out and seeing, well, can this work? And we were able to show that there is a way that these places can be turned, can be activated and brought to life. And you have a community that you can have, and you can help set up, make their temporary businesses into permanent brick and mortar businesses. So right now we're doing these follow-up reports and we're talking to the property owners and saying, here's the businesses that all came out, that got set up in this, that sold out every weekend. And so how do we get them started in brick and mortar businesses when you guys start building things? And so that's kind of the next step on this, and changing the policy to reduce the barriers to entry for small businesses. You make it easier for small food businesses that have smaller setups, that they can't go in and do the things that these large brick and mortar businesses can do. So this is going to be an interesting, we're interested to see how this is going to continue to unfold as we work with the city on policy and helping small business in the area and bringing more people out and making it continue to build upon it. So, I want to return back to my IT world. And so we, with our work, you see, we build a lot of things. And one of the things that I found was, the future of building right now is digital fabrication. And when we hear digital fabrication, everybody thinks 3D printing, which is definitely a tool, and we use that tool. But there's also laser cutting and water jets and CNC routers. In fact, we use CNC routers extensively. And this is an example of a CNC router. It's basically just a printer, imagine for wood. You put plywood on it, it cuts out these shapes, and you can make all kinds of things with this stuff. And so and these tools now are at pretty much every local high school you can imagine. They're everywhere. And so we designed an open source free library. Anyone can download public space furniture to start these community engagements with neighbors, to download and start infilling with these temporary infrastructure improvements, and to start conversations and show people the potential for these places that people were disregarding. And so this is just an example of some of the furniture that we've designed. But basically all that happens is the files look like this. They're these, we call them cut files. You download this file from our website. And what happens is you put a sheet of plywood on the machine, you hit run, it starts cutting these shapes out. You can go off, have a cup of coffee, come back in 45 minutes, and you can have 2 chairs and a table that require no glues or screws or nails. This is all friction fit together. And we tell people, if you can do that in 45 minutes, imagine what you can do to your city block in a week. And so we have several different other elements. We have bus stops, we have bike racks you can download, we have fruit and vegetable stands, We have community garden greenhouses, community garden boxes. We've got bleachers. We have a band shell. We have parklets, so you can take in those parking spaces and turn them into cafe seating. And so all that work really, this was great. And we were moving forward and doing all of these projects, and we were building that library, and that was growing. And then, what April hits us last year, or March last year, and then we hit the pandemic. And at that point, all of our work was put on hold. So we're like, our work was based on how do we make it more enticing for people to gather. And at this point, we're being told we don't want people to gather. And so, we had to stop, and we looked around like, well, what are we going to do in this time right now? And we looked at all these tools that we were using to fix the public realm, and we found out we can use those same tools actually to fix other problems. And so what we immediately did was we found out all of our hospitals were having a hard time accessing PPE devices, so specifically face shields. So we went in that helped. We found a file that someone was working with in Portland, and we took that, so it was open sourced, modified it, and we made our own CNC-able face shield, and we put it online so anyone can download it all around the world. And in short order, we were able to make these face shields that we could fabricate. They were attempting to do this in 3D printers, and 3D printing is actually a long process. It would take 2-3 hours to make this. We were able to cut it down to about 12 or 13 seconds through a CNC router, which is a subtractive process as opposed to an additive process. And the nice thing was we were able to immediately get all of our hospitals face shields. We ended up getting a grant from the United Way, and we started making 11,000 of these. And then we started having doctors in Nigeria download them, in Australia, and they were starting to make them and put in their hospitals as well. We started taking those fruit and vegetable stands that we had in our Wikiblock library, and we started giving them to restaurants so they could turn those their restaurants into outdoor bodegas and grocery stores. We started developing parklets. So again, putting those out and putting those plans online so anyone could download those and start building those to help the restaurateurs. We started developing open streets programs, working with cities to actually allow these special events to occur where they could close their streets, their residential streets, and kids could go out and play, but keep some distance as well, those spaces. And then we start, we take all of these tools and we work with local high schools. And this is the work that we had done for a while now, teaching these kids how they can take these files, modify them, make them better, improve the work that we've done, and start fixing their own schools and their own areas as well. So we do these projects all over. And the nice thing is these young kids that are doing this work, they're going to be the future builders of the world. And so it's amazing to see how fast they can take these ideas that and that we're struggling with, and they can play these games like Minecraft, and they can take those same files and they can start drawing their homes and their neighborhoods and the furniture inside of those and building those spaces. So it's been amazing to see how quick these things can kind of take off. I'm going to skip past a couple of things here. I just want to talk about just in general though, with the Better Block, we I'll scoot back on this one slide here, just showing that Better Block started getting open source, started spreading around the country after the first year, and then within the next year started going around the world. So it went from Tehran, Australia Tehran, Iran to Melbourne, Australia. So we started seeing a lot of things happening. We got a lot of attention for that work. Started working with more of our friends and neighbors to start building other things in the community. We brought our streetcar system back that had been gone for 50 years. We went in and we started making, this was a cafe we started with other residents, because we had this empty building that we wanted to kind of activate. And we started thinking, I started, getting to speak, lecture, again, I was an IT consultant, and I was being asked to lecture on urban planning. So I was lecturing on these things, and, and got to have dinner with Michelle Obama, and all this amazing things were starting to happen. We're in the Venice Biennale. I decided to run for US Congress. I tell people because I just had a free April, and started thinking, what can stop us? We had all this, we were able to figure out a way to gather our neighborhood, get this feedback, temporarily test these ideas out, see what works and what doesn't work, and start building things together as a community. when I started, this is all happening kind of fast and furious, and I thought, well, what can stop us really? And what happened for me in 2012, what completely stopped me was I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And at that point I thought, well, geez, what was all this for? I'm not gonna be able to, get to ride the streetcar we helped bring back. I'm not gonna be able to, use this bike infrastructure we helped create, or these small businesses we were helping get started in the neighborhood. And when I was at my sickest and could barely move, all of the neighbors that we'd gathered, and there was probably hundreds of them that were helping do these projects, started coming over to my place and started knocking on the door and saying, look, we want to take your daughter to go to the mall, and this is when I'm in chemotherapy and could barely move, and take your son out fishing. And then, they fill up my refrigerator with food. And then when I was at my absolute worst and could barely move, they said, hey, we want to help and build a Better Jason campaign to fix you. And I tell people what I got out of all of this work, it wasn't bike infrastructure or a good local bookstore or anything like that. What I got was a neighborhood. And that's really why we're doing all of the things we're doing, honestly. And I tell people, I think we all want the same things. We all want to build places we're proud of. We want a place that we feel safe and we can grow and thrive. And then our children do well. And as we get older, we can look back and say, look at this place that we helped nurture and grow together. And so the impetus for all this work, this action, it really comes back to this recognizing that we all want this sense of belonging. We all want a place that we can all look back together and say, look what we made together as a community. And before I forget, in 2013, I was diagnosed as being cancer-free, so I'm going to be just fine. And that's pretty much it for me. I will stop sharing here, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason, for just a whirlwind, incredible overview of all of the dynamic and really impactful things that you've been doing. I've had the opportunity to see Jason present a few times, but I always learn something new when I hear him speak, and I'm so glad you were able to join us today. We've got about 5 minutes to very quickly, so I'm going to push you to just do boom, boom on some of these questions that have come through, but I want to have an opportunity to answer some thoughtful questions that have come through in the Q&A. One of them is from Lee asking for a suggestion on how to successfully involve community members. So how do you collaborate and how do you get their ideas in the process?
Yeah, so we are typically asked to come, like a local nonprofit will invite us into a neighborhood and talk about problems that an area may have. And it might be problems with, it might be having crime issues, or maybe it has a problem with just there's no business, there's disinvestment or blight, or maybe it's transportation issue, they want to have bike infrastructure or something like that. And so, we'll meet with a ton of organizations. And so it's very hyper focused onto a small, like, block constrained area. And we do a lot of qualitative and quantitative surveying. So we'll go out and we'll ask the elected officials, we'll ask again, the churches, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, you name it, the American Heart Association, anyone who has contacts within these areas, and we'll even walk door to door. And we'll do physical and digital surveying and start asking them, what do you like about these areas? What don't you like about these areas? What's missing? What could be better? Phillip knows a lot of this work through the public space surveys that the Projects for Public Spaces help develop. And we use a lot of those kind of tools to help assess what it is. And then what we do is we create kind of a strike team with, and the nice thing about the Better Block is, like, it's not really led by us, it's led by the community. All we're there for is to help provide tools, resources, help with the permitting, with insurance, with the city on the policy to help kind of reduce the barriers to entry to these things. That's the stuff the community has a hard time pushing through because it's so bureaucratic. So, like, let us take that off your plate. We can talk to the transportation engineers. We know how to have that conversation. We know how to have the conversation with the Economic Development Office when they're saying we don't allow this type of a food trailer because it's not, it's not recommended at this level or whatnot. So we've had those things. And then with this, the CAP team, we find that we have team captains, and it can oftentimes be multiple people that want to just take a leadership role in the neighborhood. And then we open that process up to, we basically have a weekly phone call. It's an 800 number that we'll set up that's free. Anyone can log in that wants to, and kind of see the process. And we just keep coming back and saying, all right, this is what we're hearing. Are we right? Are we wrong? And then we keep tweaking that until we develop a concept plan. And then we republish the concept plan. And then we ask again, are we on the right path or in the wrong path? We kept seeing these themes pop up. Everyone's saying we want more places for our kids. And so once we start breaking that down, we're like, oh, they want playgrounds, it sounds like. And so we'll start designing things for playgrounds, and then we'll put it out there like, are we on the right path? And then we can increment that up. And then it gives us basically a model for testing through the better block period. And then the community helps build those things.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. And you actually managed to answer one of the other questions partially along the way. So ding, ding, well done. And we'll do one more really meaty one to close it with, but you've got 3 minutes, and then we'll have to hand it over to Sarah to tell everybody about the wonderful things that are happening tomorrow. But Beto is asking, with all the changes that we've seen in the last year during the pandemic, what are you most excited about? That may be in the kind of culture change and mindset change that's happened for all of us in the way we interact with the public realm going forward?
That's a great question. Well, so there's obviously the rethinking of just the streets themselves, and that and Phillip and I have had some conversations about this with parklets, and the good and the bad on that, because it's moved so fast. There were things that we've all been fighting for 10 years. And then in the span of, months, we were able to actually have them get on the ground and see how they worked. I am, again, I come back to the open source world. I'm really excited about, more of the tools and resources that we can provide to give people in the community the ability to transform their own spaces, because there's this helplessness that we all feel when we're like, things are broken. There's got to be a better way, but we also don't want these outsiders coming in and just kind of forcing something on the community. There's a community that's here, and then again, there's got to be a way we can create tools and resources for that existing community. And that's kind of been the whole premise of this work for us, is like, let's get this out here. Let's teach people how to make their own benches and their own, bus stops. And that these aren't, they don't need to be in the purview of just this small select group. These are things we should all know, because there was a time when I think we all built things more, and we've gotten more into soft skills than hard skills with time. And so that to me is exciting, kind of just maybe creating more of these tools and resources post-pandemic that are more accessible to people to start thinking about the ideas of transforming their own spaces around them.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. So as I said at the beginning, Jason Roberts, an expert in thinking about how we can increase everybody's agency and how we can, really default to action as we connect with each other. So inspired again to hear from you. Thanks so much for joining us. Inspired again to get you back out to San Francisco to see how we can collaborate more directly. And I'll hand it back over to Sarah Katz-Hyman to talk to us about tomorrow.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks both of y'all, Phillip and Jason, for that truly inspirational talk. It was amazing to see all the work and all the communities you've worked with. And thanks everyone for joining today for the Public Space Summit 2021. It's so great to see everyone online, in the chat, in the comments, interacting, sharing resources. And I want to invite everyone to come out tomorrow for the Public Space Passport Day.